Hello everyone, welcome to another day of notes. It's Mr. Smith, your 8th grade U.S. history teacher here at Emma Middle School. And today we'll be covering Chapter 1, Section 4. Now, Section 4 of your notes covers a lot of different information about government styles and how the government is meant to help the people. So I've broken down Chapter 1, Section 4 into two separate parts. And today's notes are going to cover information about the history and the background of two different monotheistic religious groups. And it's also going to cover what is a democracy and how there were two different styles of democracy or governments used during ancient time with the Athenians and the ancient Romans. So let's get to it. All right, CNN Student News. I am not going to ask you to go out of your way and watch CNN Student News because you're watching this video because you were absent and so you need the notes, or two, you're preparing for an upcoming quiz or test. So do not go watch CNN Student News. If you'd like to know what was going on, ask me or ask a classmate, or ask me how to find CNN Student News in class and I'll gladly show you so you can find it on your own. All right, so in class, we watched CNN Student News. We learned about the current events going on in the world around us currently. Then we worked on our class notes, which is going to take about 20 minutes. Then you're going to work on a source reading where you're going to compare and contrast Athenian and Roman democracy using a double bubble map. Then you're going to work on a race response that really takes your double bubble map thinking and puts it into a paragraph form, citing evidence either from the text that you're going to read or from the notes that you're going to be writing down in class before your source reading and before the race response. But either way, it's going to be an interesting class, so moving on. So the three things that we really want to have answered, or the three essential questions that we would like to master before the end of class, are these three. What are the basic beliefs of Judaism and Christianity? What is democracy? And how are Athenian and Roman democracy different? By the end of class, you should be able to identify and explain the beliefs of Judaism and Christianity, and also identify and explain how Athenian and Roman democracy differed. Now, if you're sitting in class or you're sitting at home watching this YouTube video, you're probably thinking, okay, Mr. Smith, I'm trying to follow your train of thought. We talked about Native Americans coming to North and South America at the start of this chapter. Then we talked about different Native Americans and their cultures. Then we talked about the Silk Road. How does culture of Native Americans and the Silk Road have anything to do with Judaism and Christianity and something called democracy? And the short answer is, they are connected, but you're not going to see the connection really until Chapter 2, Section 1. So we're 2 days away from actually seeing how connected these events or these topics are. What we're trying to do in Chapter 1 is really just build background knowledge. So how are these Native Americans cultured? What is their culture like? Are they actually cultured, civilized human beings, or are they not? And as we learned in class, they definitely are. Okay, how was the Silk Road connected? Well, the Silk Road talked about the spreading of different religious beliefs and cultural aspects like your customs and religion. And so you can infer that Judaism and Christianity were also spread along the Silk Road. So there's our connection there. Okay, Mr. Smith, but what about government? And the short answer to that is we're trying to figure out what different government styles were like in Europe. So we talked about how Native Americans had governments. We had the League of Iroquois and different government styles that the Native Americans used. But how did Europeans have their forms of government? Because in Chapter 2, Section 1, we're really going to see how the different cultures of Europeans and Native Americans clashed and led to disagreements and arguments between those groups of people. So stay with me. We are keeping all of this connected. It's just a little furry and a little blurry. Hopefully not furry, a little blurry, but we'll make it a lot more clear after we finish Chapter 1 and move more into Chapter 2, Section 1 and Section 2. So stay focused, keep looking at all these different pieces of information, and we're going to really piece them all together in just a little bit. Ignore the race response. We looked at a race response in class from the previous race response assignment. All right, Judaism. So on your tree map, on the left-hand column, you should see a tree branch labeled Judaism. Remember, anything in your notes that is in color needs written down on your tree map. Anything in white is not a color. So just what's in yellow needs to be written down in your notes. Okay, so what is Judaism? We talked yesterday about Islam and how Islamic groups were around and they conquered North Africa and parts of West Africa and East Africa, and that really encouraged the spread of Islam across the Silk Road. Judaism is really the first of its kind. It's the first monotheistic religion, and how it gets its start, you may actually know parts of the story where essentially around 1700 BC, there was a group of nomadic or wandering people called the Israelites. And what these Israelites believed is that there was one God. So they had this idea that, the map is showing you Israel, the current area where lots of Jewish people live in the world. So you have a geographic location of where these people come from. Judaism also originated in the Middle East around Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. So that's what this map is for. But the Jewish people are unique because they're the first group to ever have this idea of monotheism, or the belief that there is only one true God. And so they follow this one true God that they called Yahweh, and basically tried to adhere to his laws and adhere to the different religious practices that their God asked for them to follow. And so what Jewish individuals or Israelites did is they're credited with Moses, who brought down the 10 Commandments from Mount Sinai. And basically these 10 Commandments were thought to be inscribed by Yahweh or by their God. And these 10 Commandments were essentially just 10 religious and governmental laws that the Jewish people had to follow. So thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Those were the 10 Commandments, or some of the 10 Commandments. And these commandments, the Jewish individuals that practiced Judaism had to follow or had to adhere to in order to really perfect and practice their religion. And so what's crazy is this monotheistic religion has not only been the first in creating a one God religion system, monotheism, but they now have a very distinct set of rules and laws that they now have to follow. And what these laws signify is really much more than just you can't kill anyone, but these laws signify that no one is above the law. It's not so many people can't kill, so many people can't murder, but it's thou shalt not kill. So no one is above the law. No one is able to go out and kill someone just for the sake of killing people. So these Jewish individuals that practice Judaism are a monotheistic religion. So they believe in one God. And they also are credited with the 10 Commandments and creating some of the first religious laws, where the idea is that no one can break these laws and no one is above these religious laws. Pretty cool. Kind of like when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, it's not 100% the same, so the connection might be a little shaky there. But essentially, when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we're saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. We are saying as citizens that we are not above the law of the United States, that we will follow the law of the United States because we respect the Republic of the United States, and we're pledging our allegiance to the good old United States. So Judaism really kind of gives insight into how other people follow their governments. Judaism sets the standard. No one's above the law. And that's what we practice now. No one is above the law. In the United States, one person can't go kill someone and get away with it. So Judaism really sets the standard for the type of government system that we have in place in the U.S. All right, Christianity. So if you remember talking about Islam yesterday, I gave you a very brief history of monotheistic religions, or one God belief system religions. So if you have ever been to a church or you've ever been to a Sunday school, you probably know that the whole point of Christianity is that they follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. What you may not have known is that Jesus was actually a Jewish rabbi. So you have Judaism, you have Moses, and you have the different prophets and judges that follow Judaism in Old Testament. But then there's this new guy, Jesus Christ, who comes around, and he's this Jewish teacher, and he's really teaching people different views about how to live. So he's teaching people that you need to treat others like you treat yourself. If someone spurs you or someone hurts you, you need to turn the other cheek and basically just accept it, and different views like that. So it's very different from the mentality of the people at that time, where basically if someone wronged you, you got to go out and cut off their hand if they stole something from you, with Hammurabi's code or other codes and laws like that, where if someone hurt you, you got payback for it. And so these teachings of Jesus Christ are actually considered the Gospels. So if you've ever heard of the books of the Bible called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're the 4 books called the Gospels that actually explain Jesus Christ's life and Jesus Christ's teaching. And he really taught in kind of the coolest way ever. He taught through different stories called parables. And every time he told a story or a parable, it always had this little message at the end, or this moral that went with it. And really what Christianity encourages is that everyone has a chance for salvation or everlasting life. And so this idea of salvation is going to come to play when we talk about things like the Second Great Awakening and the First Great Awakening, and also the religious views of the Pilgrims and things like that, where people want to have their salvation. They want to have everlasting life. But sometimes the government in Europe is going to prevent them from actually practicing the religion that they feel is appropriate and the way that they would like to practice their religion. So Christianity, believe it or not, is a monotheistic religion as well, based off the teachings of Jesus Christ, who's seen as this prophet. Jesus taught in parables or stories with morals, and Christianity encourages everyone having an equal chance to salvation or everlasting life. And what doesn't get told a lot is that Christianity seems like this world-known religion today and this world-accepted religion, but back in the day, Christians were persecuted so much that they basically had to go into hiding, and they had to practice their religion in hiding in the bottom of houses. And it's not until about 312 years later, with something called the Edict of Milan, that really allows people to practice their religion freely. And if you're like, whoa, practicing your religion freely, or freedom of religion, that sounds familiar. It should, because that idea is going to come into play when we really talk about the Constitution and your First Amendment rights. So keep that stored away in the back of your mind. But Judaism, monotheistic religion, Christianity, both monotheistic religions. Christianity really differs where Jesus is seen as a Messiah, and he really is the one teaching different people through parables that everyone has a chance to salvation or everlasting life. Okay, so we talked about our religious backgrounds and religious beliefs of different religions that are circulating around Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia along the Silk Road, just like Islam. We're going to separate a little bit now, and we're going to talk about different forms of government. So what you have is you have a group called the Ancient Greeks. The Greeks were around in the place called Greece, which is basically the southern part of Europe, and they practiced something known as a polytheistic religion. So they had a belief in very many gods. So Judaism and Christianity are not polytheistic religions. They are monotheistic religions, whereas the Athenians or the ancient Greeks practice a poly or many-theism, many-theistic, many-god religion. So difference in religious values from Christianity and Judaism to what the ancient Greeks, where they believed in many gods. What we're really interested to know is not so much the religious beliefs of the ancient Athenians, but what was their government style like? And what the ancient Athenians had as their government style was something called direct democracy. And direct democracy is this idea where Athenian males who own land could vote on any issue directly. So essentially what would happen is any voting male could go out basically to this big hill in ancient Greece, and they would listen to the different topics being discussed. Then the ancient Greeks would literally have any male who owned land go and vote and say, yes, we agree with these decisions, or no, we don't agree with this decision. And so what Athenian democracy is it's really a place where Athenian males who own land really had to know their stuff about current events. So they really had to be aware of what was going on in society around them, because if you were just some Joe Schmo bagel who went to go listen to whatever decision the government was trying to decide upon, if you had no idea what was going on and you just voted, you would definitely affect the country in a negative way, because you have no idea what they're saying, you have no idea what they're talking about, you just are blindly voting, trying to go with whatever the crowd probably is trying to decide. So ancient Athenian democracy, these males who own land had to be well-rounded on these different issues going on in society. And that really makes for a great society, because that means that your individuals that are voting really know their stuff that's going on. I can almost guarantee that if I asked us in class who are 9 of the 9 Supreme Court justices, very few of us, if anyone, could tell me all 9 of their names. That's a government issue going on in our society today, and we're not 100% aware of what that issue is. So, yes, we have styles like the ancient Athenians where sometimes you do vote directly on things like presidential elections. You vote directly on who you would like to be president. But we're not as well-rounded as the ancient Greeks, because we don't know everything going on in our government today. There's no way you could, because you'd have to be aware of world politics. You'd have to be aware of domestic politics or things going on in the United States, everywhere in the United States. And that's a whole lot of information to remember, let alone get everyone in the United States to vote on that one issue, which is kind of crazy. So direct democracy, we in the United States really use it when we're voting on presidents and senators and House of Reps members, but then we don't really use it when we're voting directly on issues affecting the United States. That's a different form of democracy. You guessed it if you were thinking, it's the Roman democracy. So after the ancient Greeks basically go away, they get conquered, and then a new form of empire basically arises, and they're called the Romans. So in 509 BC, the Romans are going to set up something called a republic. This is their form of democracy. This is their form of creating a government where the people get to make a choice. So in this Roman Republic, you have elected officials who are going to be chosen to make decisions for the entire nation or empire of the Romans. So it's almost like when we're electing a president to make decisions, or we're electing senators to make a decision, or electing House of Representative members to make decisions for our country, that's exactly the form of democracy that these Romans used. So they created a republic where elected officials are chosen to help the nation. These elected officials, oh my gosh, just like in the United States, created something called a Senate, where basically the Senate's role was to make laws for different citizens to follow. All the citizens were expected to follow this law. So again, kind of like with Judaism, no one is above the law in ancient Roman times under this republic. So the Senate would make laws, they would pass laws, and it would be this elected group that the people chose, mainly males who own land, but these people would choose who would become Senate members, and the Senate was expected to make these laws. This is exactly what we have in the United States today. We have a republic where we have Senate members who are voted into office, and the Senate members and the House of Representative members are the ones making these decisions and making these laws that we as citizens have to follow. Another point that's very similar to the United States is that in cases of court systems, all citizens under Roman times were thought to be innocent until they were proven guilty. So that's the same system that we use in the United States. It doesn't necessarily go with democracy, more with the judicial system and how the courts work and things like that. But it's also an interesting connection to how similar ancient Romans in 509 BC are to us in the United States today. And again, the idea of the ancient Romans are going to help spread across the Silk Road. It's going to spread to different parts of Asia and different parts of Africa and also different parts of Europe. This idea of a republic and senators being chosen and elected to make laws for citizens to follow. All right, so if you were paying close attention, you almost don't even need to read the sources, but still, you need to read the sources. So what you're going to do and what the expectation is that you're going to figure out what is the difference between Greek or Athenian and Roman democracy in their forms of governments. You're going to fill in this double bubble map that you have on the back of your notes paper, and you're going to tell me the differences and similarities between these two groups and their forms of government. After you've completed that double bubble assignment, you're going to write a race response that answers the following question. So how do Athenian and Roman democracy forms differ? Let me restate that. It was a little hard to read it as I was saying it. So how do Athenian and Roman forms of democracy differ? And which type of democracy does the United States use today? So think back to your double bubble map. Think back to your notes. How are Athenian and Roman forms of government or forms of democracy different? So think about how people are elected, who's making decisions, and things like that. Then lastly, what type of democracy does the United States use today? Does it use parts of one? Does it use parts of another? Does it use all the parts of both? You tell me. Make sure that you're backing up your claim to these questions with evidence from either the notes or from the sources that you use to fill in your double bubble map. Until next time, Mr. Smith, out.